Hi friends, it's Mali. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new, and welcome to my January reading wrap up. I am so late with my reading wrap up this year because, quite honestly, at the start of the year, I was going back and forth and I was not even sure if I should even continue making reading wrap ups. I'm still not decided, but in the meantime, I thought that I will come on here and do my January reading wrap up at the very least. So, if you guys have any ideas on how I should do these reading wrap ups, let me know. I'm just not sure that it's worth it because I already film a lot of the books that I read on vlogs, and so I feel like if you watch my vlogs and then you watch my reading wrap ups, it starts to get kind of repetitive. Let me know if you guys like to see these videos in the first place. Let me know if I should do them maybe every 2 months or so, or every quarter, or if I should do shorter reading wrap-ups and only talk about the books that I haven't shown in videos. You guys let me know what you like to see. In the meantime, I thought that I would come on here and do my January reading wrap-up. So we're gonna talk about the 8 books that I read in the month of January. January for me was a month of quantity over quality. I was definitely bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I came into the month really excited to read a lot of books. I read so many books that I was so excited for, and they ended up being such disappointments. I'm shocked that they were disappointments because I definitely thought that I would enjoy them because there were books by authors that I have read before. And so the very first book is one of such instance. So this is a book that I was really excited to read. It's written by an author that made my favorites of 2024. And I'm talking about Life Form by Jenny Slate. This is Jenny Slate's second memoir. And in this one, she talks about motherhood, being pregnant, raising a child, and the body. I definitely came to this book thinking that Jenny Slate was going to change my perspective on being pregnant and having a child, because as of right now, I don't want to offend any mothers in the chat, but I think being pregnant sounds disgusting. It just doesn't sound appealing to me. I do not want a child, but I really like reading about that. I really like reading about motherhood. I think it's such an interesting concept, especially because I can't relate, but I like having different perspectives on it. And so Jenny Slate for me is an author that just imbues so much joy and whimsy into her writing. And so I was just ready to have that perspective on motherhood being unfathomable for me to it being a joyous and beautiful experience. I was just expecting it to be just so beautiful in terms of the writing style. This had none of that odd yet charming whimsical quality to Jenny Slate's writing. Felt so different to Little Weirds. Obviously, of course, I didn't expect that to be Little Weirds Part 2, the sequel, but I expected the qualities of what I liked in Little Weirds to be present in Life Form. And it wasn't there. It didn't feel like the same Jenny Slate who wrote Little Weirds for me, and that was just so disappointing. It honestly felt like Jenny Slate just had to write a second book under her contact. You know what I mean? Like she just had to write it. And she actually talks about being uninspired and looking for inspiration whilst writing that book. Like she talks about, oh, chores get in the way of writing. And she talks about being inspired by the dishwasher. I just can't believe that Jenny Slate wrote Little Weirds and then she also wrote Life Form, and then it ended up being my first 2-star of the year. So I'm actually so sad. You guys don't understand the betrayal. Well, I guess you do. The betrayal that you feel when an author whose work you previously loved then writes something so atrocious, so out of character. The second book that I picked up in January was Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle. This book is a book that I dragged on for the entirety of 2024. And so I was really excited to finally get to it in January. I definitely took January as like the month to finally read books that I was really excited for a bit. Headshot is a very sharp novel in which we follow a fictional all-girls boxing tournament, and we also follow the girls who are competing in that tournament. This book is much about the sport of boxing and hours of practice, the sacrifices that the girls did, the endurance that they have to find. And it is also just as much of the girls, we get to know them, we get to know their past, their future, their hopes, their dreams, and we do so while being in the girls' inner thoughts. So it's very much a stream of consciousness novel, which is an aspect that I really enjoyed. So the book moves in tandem with the tournament. So the first chapter is the first tournament and so on until we get to the finals. So while I like that aspect of getting to know the girls and getting to know who they were as people, however, I found that the rest of the girls weren't as interesting or fleshed out as the first pair. I definitely think that the first pair of girls just had a lot more dimension to them. As I kept reading, I found that a lot of the girls just started to blur together. I couldn't keep their stories straight. They all felt quite similarly about the sport of boxing. They were there for a lot of similar reasons. And so, yeah, it started to blur together. I do think that the concept was very, very cool. I just wish the girls were have felt more individual. I wish that we knew them beyond the sport and what the sport meant for them. Next, I picked up We Do Not Part by Han Can. This is Han Can's highly anticipated release after winning a Nobel Prize last year. And while I do not doubt that Han Can deserves the prize, I, however, did not really care for We Do Not Part. Before you guys tear me to shreds, because I feel like Han Can is such a beloved author, and again, for very good reason, let me speak my piece. Let me defend myself, okay? So in this one, we follow two women, Kyung-ha and In-sung. They are lifelong friends. They're both artists. They met in college. They're both living in Seoul. However, In-sung is from Jeju, and so she eventually moves back to Jeju to take care of her failing mother. I think she had dementia. Many years pass. Kyung-ha is still in Seoul, but In-sung stayed in Jeju after her mother's death, taking care of the family estate. And one day, In-sung suffers an accident and she has to be flown to the hospital in Seoul. And she asks Kyung-ha for a very important favor. She asks Kyung-ha if she can travel to Jeju in order to take care of In-sung's pet birds. And it is from this point on that the narrative takes a very dreamy, hazy feel. Kyung-ha makes the journey to In-sung's house in Jeju, but it takes a very dangerous turn because there is a snowstorm in the island. Finally, Kyung-ha makes it to In-sung's house, and it is in the house that Kyung-ha discovers all that the house has witnessed throughout the years. Once in the house, Kyung-ha's present day timeline becomes very muddy. People come back from the dead, and the atmosphere is very hazy, like I said earlier. Alongside Kyung-ha, we discover clippings, letters, notes, and documents that tell the horrors of the Jeju massacre in 1948. And let me tell you that reading about a 70-year-old massacre while currently living in a timeline where I get to see a genocide unfold through my phone screen was so eerie. There were many parallels between the two: children and babies being executed, bodies in mass graves, people going missing. So while I do get the importance of Han Kang's work in We Do Not Part, shining light to a forgotten part of Korean history to a very broad audience, I think my issue with the book lies in the pacing of it. The narrative is extremely slow in the first 100 or so pages, and not a lot happens until the 150-ish mark, which is when Kyung-ha discovers all the newspaper clippings and the documents and discovers the horror of the Jeju massacre. The narrative during this part felt a lot more rich and compelling in terms of storytelling, and I so wish that the entirety of the novel had the same feeling. Also, very strangely enough, I felt very disconnected from the characters and from the happenings of the massacre. Despite In-sung having a very personal connection with the massacre, her own mother was alive during that part, and she never knew anything about it until the mother died many years later. Like she never got to talk about this with her mother, or we never got a perspective about the massacre from her mother's perspective. Like, I so wish we got a more personal feeling to that, yet we only got like echoes of it from many years in the future. And honestly, now that I talk about it, maybe that was the point. Maybe it was about how, history is erased with our elders and how we have to talk to our elders about this, or maybe how sometimes history is so unforgiving, is so rough to talk about it that you can't. And so you have to find out about it in this way. But I don't know, it is fiction. So I just wish the narrative was a little more compelling like it was on the second and then final part of the novel. Definitely want to read more Han Kang. I have The Vegetarian on my TBR, and I eventually want to get to the rest of her backlist. I know that I read The Vegetarian like so long ago, but I don't remember anything about it. So it will be like I'm reading it for the very first time, which it's so cool. That was Reaching Out part. I definitely want to know more people's perspectives about it. I feel like I've heard a lot of people not really talk about this novel. I've heard a lot of people being excited for it, but I definitely want to know if we have the same thoughts about it or if you guys definitely love this one. I am so conflicted because I did not like a lot of it, yet I do understand the importance of this part of history being told. And so I'm so grateful for Han Kang to writing about it because I definitely did not know. I think I have heard a little bit about it, but I did not know about what exactly went on. And so reading about it definitely made me want to research about it and read more in depth about it. And I do think that was Han Kang's like purpose with this novel, to like bring it forward. And so I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, I definitely just had issues with the pacing. Then I read The Door by Magda Savo, and this was the first book of 2025 that finally worked for me. It finally checked off all the boxes in things I look for in fiction. This is narrated by Magda. She's an acclaimed writer, and I actually did not know her name until I looked at the back of the book because she remains unnamed for the majority of this book. We do not know her name until one very heartbreaking scene, and then is never talked about again. And that's because Magda is not the star of this book, but is in fact Emerence, who is Magda's housekeeper and later friend. At first, Emerence and Magda don't really get along. Emerence herself is a very peculiar woman who, despite being respected by everybody in the neighborhood, she keeps quite a distance from everybody else. However, she never takes a day off from work. She does have a very unorthodox way of doing her job. For example, she will come in at 11 p.m. at night to stock your fridge and clean it. Yet she does such a good job at this that people sort of like look away from her oddities and just let her do her thing, you know? This book is such a deep character study on Emerence, and we get to know her in such an intimate way. And if you know anything about me, you know that that's my bread and butter when it comes to fiction. I love getting to know a character in a way that we get to know Emerence. I absolutely loved getting to know Emerence, and not only getting to know her, but also understanding her. And that for me was such a treat. I absolutely adore the writing in this one as well. I'm actually floored that this is a translation because it is so well done. There's not one sentence in here that feels out of place or feels awkward or clunky. And in fact, there are so many quotes in here that have continued to haunt me long after finishing this novel. For example, I'm going to read you guys one quote that I think, if it doesn't convince you to read this book, I don't know what will. I believe it was from this moment that Emerence truly loved me without reservation, gravely almost, like someone deeply conscious of the obligation of love, who knows it to be a dangerous passion fraught with risk. Isn't that just so good? This is a very delicate and tender story about the deep love and understanding between two very different women, and then ultimately the betrayal between the two. Perfume by Patrick Susskind is set in the 1700s France, and the baby has been born. His name is Grenouille. Apologies for my pronunciation. You can blame my dad for that because he speaks French, yet he never taught me. One of the many ways he has let me down. Anyways, Grenouille has been abandoned by his mother. He spends his childhood bouncing around foster homes until he is sold at the tender age of 8 to a tanner, where he will work in very dangerous conditions. One day, he is sent to deliver some leather hides to a former great perfumer Baldini, and it is there that Grenouille begins his pursuit on making the perfect perfume. Grenouille was born with two very peculiar things about himself. The first is that he doesn't have an odor. He doesn't smell like human. This allows him to move almost invisibly through the world. And secondly is that he has a very strong sense of smell himself. So he can smell things and people from miles away. He can recognize a lot of scents that a normal human wouldn't. And he can categorize them and kind of store them away in his brain for later use. And it is the same sense of smell that brings him to murder a very young girl when he is only a child himself. He's so overcome by her pleasant smell that he kills her. He will then spend the rest of his life trying to recreate that perfect scent, and he goes to some very extreme lengths in order to recreate it. This was a deliciously dark, brutal, and twisted coming of age. I really liked following Grenouille's very sad life story. He never developed a good sense of morals due to his upbringing, and it felt really strange to both root for his survival but also be repulsed by his actions. The ending of this was so bizarre, and overall, I had a really good reading experience. I just sadly haven't really thought about this since finishing it. After Perfume, I then picked up another 2025 release that I was really excited for, but then let me down. And I'm talking about We Could Be Rats by Emily Austen. I've really enjoyed Emily Austen's previous work. However, I'm very sad to say that this completely missed the mark for me. And this one we follow sisters Sigrid and Margit, I think her name was, which is a very weird name. They're two very different humans despite having the same upbringing. Their house was one full of anger. Their parents will just quickly come to the conclusion to yell at each other and to yell at the sisters themselves. Because of this, Margit grew up to be someone who was very quick to please. She would read a room and try to de-escalate the situation. She grew up to be an university academic and was always on the lookout for her sister. Sigrid, on the other hand, will speak her mind. She was not scared of confrontation. She really much preferred to live in her own fantasy world. She had a very overactive imagination growing up, and she continued with the habit as a young adult, which started to get on my fucking nerves, let me tell you that. However, she was seen as this disappointment of the family because she didn't graduate high school and she got stuck in her little town working a very meager job. Before I continue, I do want to let you guys know that this is a book very heavily centered on suicide. So if that's a topic that triggers you, I don't think you should read this book, or if you do go into it knowing that, be very, very cautious. And in fact, the narration is told through a series of suicide letter drafts in which Sigrid recounts her life, her childhood, her reluctance on growing up, which again got on my nerves, and her friendship with her best friend. This type of formatting got really repetitive after a little bit, and I never found that I grew connected to Sigrid or Margit. I never really warmed up to Sigrid. In fact, I found her character so annoying. She was just very much hide into her fantasy world and reject real life. This is by far Austen's darkest work, and I actually found that there was none of the very quirky yet relatable characters that I grew to love in Emily Austen's previous work. And because of the darker tone in this one, there was very few laugh out loud moments in this. Don't think I was ready for that change of tone. Maybe in the future I will appreciate Austen's maturity to try something new, but at the moment I wanted something, I didn't get that. I wanted Emily Austen's previous formula. Continuing on with the negativity, I then read The Coin by Jasmine Sahar. The blurb promises the story of a young Palestinian woman who emigrates to New York City and gets involved into a pyramid scheme on selling Birkin bags, but I found that was not the focus at all. In fact, we get a lot more about her landing a job in the city as a middle school teacher, her very unorthodox way of running the classroom. She is completely spiraling, and she brings down these kids with her. Very funny enough though, it talks about her having a rough time in America, in New York City, but she only shops for designer and she actually has an inheritance and a wealth. The story of her trying to make it in America is not true. She's honestly a huge snob and I never really liked her character. She gets into a very weird relationship with this man who she calls Trenchcoat. And it is with him that she does get into the scheme of acquiring Birkin bags and then reselling them for profit. And you think that's what you're getting, but in fact, you're getting a story on a woman who's barely holding on and falling into her delusions. She's obsessed with being clean, and instead we get a lot of pages on her shower routine. I think that this tried to say something more interesting about class, nationality, and sexuality, but it got lost in the text for me, and I just don't think it brought anything new to the unsound woman genre. So the last book that I read in the month of January was How It Works Out by Miriam Lacroix, and this was a better end to my reading month. In this one, we followed the relationship of Allison and Miriam through very different alternate realities of themselves. It asks, what if X was different, or what if X happened, or if X was like X. I love that exploration of one singular relationship through different lens. I thought it was very tender that they saw connection and understanding in each and every single hypothetical. Very funny though, I initially thought that this was a novel, but that's because each short story felt so interconnected with each other, despite each hypothetical radically changing Allison and Marion's relationship. In some of the stories, for example, they were in love and everything was great, they were getting to know each other. In some of them, they were just friends. In some of them, they were not even together. They're going through rough patches. Their relationship had lost its spark. In some of them, they were cannibals. There were a lot of things going on in this book, but at the same time, it all felt so connected and linear. I liked the campy style of the stories, and I loved how it brought something fresh and new to the queer fiction genres. Yeah, I will definitely be on the lookout for whatever else Marion LaCroix writes next. I think she is an author to definitely be on the lookout for. Before I wrap up this video, I do briefly want to mention the two books that are DNF in the month of January. The first one being Beautyland. I don't know if I will continue on with this book. I soft DNF'd it for now. I might try again in the future. I couldn't really get into it, and I just found that it was so long. I don't know. I was 50% through, wasn't really feeling it, and so I put it down. I might come back to it just because I know that it made a lot of favorites lists in 2024. The second book that I DNF'd was Murakami's The City and Its Uncertain Walls. This was just so boring for no reason. I have tried reading Murakami throughout the years. I know that I read Norwegian Wood back in like 2017. I don't remember what I thought about the novel, but then a couple years ago, I tried reading, I think something about Cheap. Didn't really like that one, and then I tried this one. I also did not really like this one. I don't know, I just felt like it was so long for no reason. I don't think it had to be that long. My Kindle version was about 700 pages. At first I was really liking the vibe. It had a very Studio Gilby-esque type of vibe that I really enjoyed, but my god, why was it so boring? And why was it so long? Again, another book that I DNF'd around the 50% mark. I just cannot bring myself to finish it. So those were all the books that I read and DNF'd in the month of January. Hoping that the rest of the year looks up. I'm still very excited to read. Even so, January was not such a good start, especially that first book. I can't believe that I hated Life Form. Can't believe Jenny Slate did that to me. But yes, I'm gonna be wrapping up the video. I've been talking for an hour. Again, let me know how you guys want me to do the reading wrap-ups from now on. Definitely want you guys input in that. And if you have read any of the books that I have read in this video, talk to me about them. Let me know your different perspective about it. Maybe you like them and I didn't, and maybe I liked them but you didn't. Also, let me know what your favorite book of January was. Mine definitely was The Doors. It was my first 4-star of the year, and possibly 5-star. Maybe if I keep thinking about it, it could change to a 5-star. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching up until this point. Thank you guys so much for tolerating the lighting changes. Again, it's just the sun going behind clouds. I can't do anything about the sun, you guys. But yeah, anyway, it annoys me, and I know it annoys you guys too. So thank you for tolerating, and I'll see you very, very soon in a new video. Bye.